life is sort of passive. It can be quite sedentary in school, and actually, children are much better when they're active, and they're engaged and they're enjoying it. And you see that. And actually, when you have teachers go, "I've never seen my child like that before. I can't. I've never heard the buzz of this around the school. I've never, you've got parents coming in going, well, can you tell me what's going on at school at the moment? Because my child just come home and just won't stop talking about this. And my child never talks about school. You've got children who are borderline elective mute who are speaking. And I think you begin to see, when you do work like this, you begin to see children in a different light.
Welcome to Rethinking Education. Education's critical friend.
Hi, Pete. Great to see you. So we're going to be talking for a little while about you and about your work. Could you just start off by introducing yourself to everybody?
Hi, I'm Pete Higgin. I'm the Artistic Director for Punchdrunk Enrichment.
And I'll tell you a little bit more about Punchdrunk Enrichment. What is that?
Good question. So Punchdrunk Enrichment is a theatre company, and we're an immersive theatre company, and we work with schools, with communities, and with families. A lot of our practice is founded in schools work. I'm also a co-founder of immersive theatre company Punchdrunk, so I helped set that up many, many years ago. And at a point on that journey, I sort of stepped sideways and married up my interest in education and applied drama with my love of immersive theatre.
So this thing about immersive theatre, then, you're going to have to explain that a little bit more to me and maybe to other people as well. What exactly do you mean by that?
What do we mean by that, indeed? So I suppose in terms of immersive theatre, and I can sort of speak from Punchdrunk and Punchdrunk Enrichment, it's about placing the audience inside a story, placing the audience inside a story world, and sort of very early Punchdrunk work, which set the form for the work, was about taking over a disused building or site, and then reimagining it as the world of whatever show or text was being explored. So for the audiences there, they are very much able to traverse the space, go wherever they want to go, follow the story they want to follow, and the spaces are transformed by sound, light, smell, and everything about that story tells and kind of immerses you in that world. So you're literally dunked into the world. So and for Punchdrunk Enrichment, very much taking that design practice and that theatrical quality, but putting that into educational and community spaces, not always on such a grand scale, but really thinking quite hard about how you place the audience or the participant in the center of an experience and how you build an experience around them. And I like to see, if we were taking over a building for a kind of traditional Punchdrunk show, for Punchdrunk Enrichment, often we're trying to take a project or a narrative and put it inside an organization, put it inside a school, and work out, how can you make this work within the school day? How can you make this work within a organization that has break here or lunch there, or these kids need to be in swimming at that point? This child has that particular need. So we fuse the practice, but the really important thing for the Punchdrunk Enrichment practice is about trying to kind of place the audience at the heart. And the sort of final thing I'll say on it for now is it's about it's sort of about a transformative experience, really. And in terms of the name Punchdrunk, it can be a problematic word in some respects, but actually what it means is to feel sort of not like you've been knocked senseless, but actually that your senses have been assaulted, and actually you've got, you're feeling sort of an overload almost, you're sort of your senses, and you're completely bewildered almost. We often talk about it in terms of awe and wonder. these moments of awe and wonder. And actually early work, you saw audiences kind of coming out with that sort of look on their face where they're not sure what's just happened. Yeah.
All right, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask you about the metaphor of a punch drunk. But yeah, I can see them as they're sort of coming out, that kind of look that people have when they've just had an experience that's really sort of blown them away.
Yeah,
that's where that name comes from. Then.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. That's cool. I hadn't thought about it that way. So if I sort of talk about maybe my understanding of what you've just said, and then see how that aligns with your thinking. So in a traditional theatre, then the actors are up on a stage, and then the audience come in, and then they're sat in rows, and then the lights go out, and the actors don't directly interact with the audience, except obviously in pantomime or Brechtian theatre or something like that. But they're generally they're on the stage, and the audience on the chairs. So, but in an immersive theatre, the actors are interacting directly with those people. And would you call them an audience, or are they considered as participants? How would you describe that?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, you do call them an audience in lots of ways, but I think for the Punchdrunk Enrichment work, there is a sense of agency, and the performers do address the audience directly and interact with them. And for me, the most exciting work is where they become a main character in the story, and actually what they give and what they say doesn't necessarily improvisationally change where we go, but it does give a sense of a feedback loop for the audience where they feel what they are doing has purpose and what they are doing is driving this forward. So yeah, they're active within it. And you're right in terms of the sort of division of audience and performance and performers. It can be passive in a more traditional setup, which is not necessarily a bad thing for lots of shows, because you're being actively engaged in lots of other ways. But yeah, there is a sort of breaking down of the fourth wall and a merging of that area. So it's more of a shared space. So yeah, you're within that set. Yeah, that's right. That's a good sort of explanation of it.
Right. So this thing about improvisation is interesting. So how much you sort of suggested that there is a little bit of improvisation, but it doesn't change. Well, I'll say, and then you tell me if I'm on the right line. So it doesn't change necessarily the direction that things are going in a kind of dramatic way, or a dramatic or a major way. Sorry. But it's more about integrating the ideas and things that are happening in the room into an unfolding narrative that's established before in the writing stage. Yes,
yeah. I suppose if we're sort of really talking about the Punchdrunk Enrichment work, it's in schools. If you're a teacher doing the work, or if you're a performer interacting, then you really need to, it's good improvisation in terms of you don't say no. So you never stop something, but you take it, everything's a gift, and you pick it back up and you weave it back in. And actually you write the script in a way whereby, and you structure the experience in a way whereby really you've planted a few seeds about the answer that you want earlier on. So ideally, and especially for the work with children, and is about, you basically try and give them the answers as the kind of pre-experience, or you make sure that they're primed to be able to navigate through this. So it's, I think we'd all love to do the kind of choose your own adventure, storybook adventure that kind of goes in lots of different kind of branching narratives. And maybe we will one day, but actually to kind of create a sort of satisfying arc, you often have to have quite a rigid space. But as I'm saying that, there's quite a lot about the work that we do in schools, and the way we empower teachers is to be quite playful, and actually to be able to respond to children and to respond to what they want to do. And actually that's what it often does in its responses engender a kind of a sense of playfulness. And actually, we know when children are at play, they're really at their best. So if you can kind of, and we know that early years foundation stage work is really, really child-led and really play-based. And actually, if you can begin to tap into that and use that, then actually sometimes, for elements of projects where you need to come up with stories or you need to come up with ideas, actually there is a chance for you just to pick up on what's interesting the children. And we've seen and heard of it before where teachers have, latched onto the idea of a child and, they weren't planning to do that, but actually everybody was really behind it and into it, and they went with it and they got really great results out of it. They got, really engaged work. So I suppose we're talking about this a bit in the abstract in some respects, but in terms of, I can give you the context of a project, but
we'll come to that. So I can imagine it happening. I think it's, from what you're saying, it's kind of both and. So you've got a structure and a story that's kind of unfolding, so that you're not set at zero. It's not like a blank slate or an empty page. But as you're going along, you're responsive to the students and their ideas, and if you can, you're trying to integrate them into what you're doing. If you can't, obviously, then you'll sort of move on. But yeah, it's a much more kind of responsive, or far more responsive approach to the traditional theatre. But in terms of the enrichment side, I don't know whether you think of the enrichment in terms of the classroom, but I've looked at your website, and we'll talk about the kinds of things that you do in specifics in a moment. But there's also that enrichment for experience, I think, from what I'm understanding here.
In terms of?
Well, in terms of, if you're enriching a classroom, you're bringing in all the props and the stage sets and all the other things you're doing, but you're also enriching what it is to be a student through a theatrical experience. Yes.
Yeah. A lot of the work that we do is actually, it's more in the mind, actually. It's more in the potential you see for your space afterwards. You can do that in a really small way. But I think what's always true of our work is that it's the sort of integrity of the design that helps to make something very believable. But we always think about our work into a lot of it. A key motif is portals. So often we're thinking about projects which take you over a threshold. And you enter this world. And I think what's really great when we get it right, it's not actually in the moment of the project is brilliant, but actually what you've potentially done is open a child or a teacher's mind to lots of other possibilities. And obviously you can spend a huge amount of time and energy transforming space, but actually if you can transform the idea that there's the potential of magic, or there's potential for something imaginative to happen within your school, and it doesn't need to be that the space is transformed, and actually you have that experience at school, and then you see school in a different way. That's the big thing, right? You want to see school in a different way, and the more things we can do at school which really positively engage pupils and give them those core memories which go, I remember the day that this happened. Right. That's the thing that keeps you coming back to school, and that's the thing that keeps you engaged and excited at school. And I think it's the projects we've done, and actually teachers seeing that happen to their pupils, they want to try and have more of that, or they want to see how they can continue that. So you're right. Once you have that experience in your school, you very much view yourself and your school, and maybe even your teacher, completely differently.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk to you in a little while about what happens when you leave and it carries on, because I know that's become a significant part of the way that the work has developed. But just before we get to that that question. Can you give us a description of one of I don't know what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it an event. Would be an event be the right word for it? Or
we call them projects. We call them projects.
Project.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give us a description.
I'm going to pick a project which is quite new, actually. It's a project which is part of an initiative called Immersive Learning Journeys, which is funded by the Paul Hamlin Foundation. And it's a project that we call Route 158 on our website, but internally we call it's sort of narratively called Travel. And it's actually in its second year, this academic year, and it's going out to schools in the summer term. And it had its sort of first venture out last summer. And the project starts in a very small way last year, where stones started arriving in school. People would just find stones on their chair, in their drawer, on the front doorstep, and actually, and then sometimes there'd be a big pile somewhere, and slowly over the course of a period, these stones just kept being all at the same, different sizes, but all at the same. And at one point, a stone arrives and it's got a dictaphone strapped to it. And the caretakers also reported that there's been some funny interference on their radio. And we discover, listening to this dictaphone, that the stones have actually come from a world called Weaverlania. And we discovered that this company, Amish Travel, exists, and that there's a crisis of sorts happening in their land, whereby the waters of their river, the Great Furrow River, are waning, and the land is sort of turning from colourful to not so colourful. But in the areas, in some areas, it's very colourful. And for example, there's a school called Hamo, and in a place in Weaverlania called Hymornia, it's really colourful. It's really brilliant. So, and there's another school on the project called Middle Park, and in a place in this world called Middle Lark. Okay. It's except so. They realised that these are significant areas, and they realised that these stones have been falling out of their world in somewhere else. So they drop a dictaphone message, and they begin to send the school and the pupils a number of instructions saying, "Look, you know, we need your help. We need to find out more about you. We need to find out more about where you are, so that we can basically locate a portal to come to you." And then, lo and behold, with all the stones that the students have gathered and found, there's actually one stone for every child in the school. The school create a massive mural on the floor of their playground, basically helping this bus to navigate interdimensionally to their school. And Monday morning or Tuesday morning, whenever they arrive, the bus arrives at school, and it's a double-decker bus. It says Amish Travel down the side. It's got a little tent out the front of it where the front doors are, and there's a whole school assembly. And then we meet the characters. They're all in their kind of boiler suits. They're kind of rocking a bit of a Stranger Things vibe, almost a bit Sigourney Weaver as well, in terms of the first Alien film. It's it turns out they basically are coming to collect what becomes known as Immerfuel, which is imagination. So they spend a day at the school. They distribute a whole bunch of tubes, which children fill up with stories and objects and bits and bobs. And for last year, we had about 90 children go through a performative experience on the bus to be inaugurated as crew. And there's various tricks within the bus where things appear. Their imagination suddenly appears in Weaverlania, and something comes through a magic chute, and it's exactly the kind of thing they'd imagined, and so their imagination has come to life. So, and we were quite targeted with the school this year, going, look, who do you think most needs this kind of experience this year? Let's send those children on. Next year, everybody will go through. And Yeah, we end the day with a kind of number of students from the original 90 who went on coming back onto the bus and loading the tubes into the engine, and then there's this massive dial in the bus where it suddenly fills up, and they've got enough immer fuel to carry on, and then they go, and that's the end of chapter 1. And chapter 2 is and then we do that in the 8 schools, and all of the 8 schools have got their own corresponding area in Weaverlania. And we're just working on this summer's offering, which is going to be very much about twinning, connecting those worlds even further, and twinning those schools with that world, and spending a week in school kind of exploring what a celebration of their school might look like, and what a celebration of their school culture might look like, as if they're essentially creating a mirror town in Weaverlania. So that was a long way in the making, because we were almost about to deliver it in 2020, and then suddenly lockdown came, and we locked it away. But so that's Route 158, or Amish travel, and that sort of is the first time we've tapped into this wider sort of metaverse that we've created called Weaverlania.
Right. So that's chapter 1, and then chapter 2 is happening next
in the summer. Yeah.
So the same students are
same
all the
school.
ones that are same school, but obviously some have moved on. But
some will move on. Yeah, some will move on, and we'll have obviously a new cohort in. But loads more will go through. We're trying to get the whole school through the bus over the course of the week, and actually will end in a kind of playground celebration, and that will be the end of this project that we're doing called Immersive Learning Journeys.
Right. So I'm imagining this bus is not an ordinary double-decker bus. Then when you go on it's decked up in a way. Could you describe what it's like inside?
You go in the front door, and I mean, obviously we can't change too much the architecture of it, but there's no seats, and then it's a wood panelled, and I mean, it's for all intents and purposes a little bit like a spaceship, although you drive from the front, but when you go down into the main, we don't go upstairs. We had a very long conversation, and rightly, it's completely inaccessible, and actually with all of our tech work up there, there's not enough time. So you go in, and then we've got on one side, we've got kind of an engine gauge area. So we've got a whole bunch of kind of like dials that are going up and down. We've got the immer fuel gauge, which swirls round and fills up over the course of the day. You've got a whole bunch of kind of knobs and kind of things you can twiddle, which all have a life in terms of being able to help this thing navigate through space and time. And then on the other side, you've got a kind of more analog kind of navigational sort of section where you'd be doing measurements, and you'd be looking at maps on the wall, and taking sort of field notes. And then at the back of the bus, where over the back wheel arches, there's seating area. There's a seating area there, and that's kind of sort of more a laboratory area and a kind of small research type station. And we've cut the middle out of the, we come back to the middle of the bus. We've cut the middle out of the ceiling, so there's a big, it's double height at that point, and then there's all sorts of pipes and stuff going up out of that, and then we've got this big, what we call the egg, but it's called the tenarium, and that is the sort of engine of the bus which captures all of the imagination and stores it all kind of battery-esque. And then there is actually a character who pops their head out, the sort of the engine Immersive, who pops their head out and is covered in grease and clearly making sure it's all working. So it's completely blacked out in there. It's full theatrical kind of lighting system, and everything, every light in there you can control and change the states. And there's various different chutes and portals and ways to. There's a microphone where you can input imaginative ideas, and it sort of echoes around the bus. There's a telephone to the Amish travel depot back in Weaverlania. There's and then there's these chutes which you can send imagination up into the engine, and you can send things between Weaverlania and our world, and that's where they receive. You put something in there and then shut the door, and then you
just
open
kind
it,
of sucks it up like
exactly.
an old style.
Yeah. I mean, it's magic.
Okay.
Let's face it.
Yeah.
But we're really blessed to have very clever set designers and people, and then there's a whole kind of live feed thing going on in there as well. So there's a helmet cam for one of the characters so we can do kind of whole school assembly and show where we've not been able to get all of the children on the bus for the first episode. We wanted to try and make sure that everybody was connected to it. So we sort of, the team spent a lot of time kind of thinking about live feed and thinking about how you kind of bring the school together at specific moments. So yeah, we kind of pushed ourselves a bit there because we don't usually do that sort of thing. So, but it's really always important for us to try and reach as many children as possible in a project.
Yeah, I was just.
Hopefully that paints a picture.
No, it does. Very much so. I've obviously had a look at your website, and if people haven't looked at your website, and then they should, because there's photographs on there of various projects you've done in the past. Are there photographs of this one? Have you put that up there yet?
There should be. Yeah, there should be some photos, and we're about to launch a video as well of it as well.
Oh, right, great.
So,
all right, well, I'll dig those.
Yeah. It's just I'm sure. Yeah, but I mean, by the time this podcast is live, then the video will be out. But
right.
Yeah,
right.
check out. I mean, on our YouTube channel, and there's loads of different video content across all of our projects as well.
Right. So this seems to be a massive kind of benefit from the work that you've done previously in theatre, and you were saying about set designers and people like that. Do they work exclusively for you, or are they people that you bring in from the industry?
I mean, set designers. I mean, a big shout out to freelancers, really, in terms of you're working in the theatre industry and you're. It's run by the work we make is powered by freelancers and freelance artists who've had a really tough time over the last couple of years. So yeah, we've got people that we work with quite regularly, and we're always trying to develop new folk as well. And there's a sort of very specific way that we approach work. So you're always trying to kind of get people to sort of embody that ethos and that approach, which is different from designing something just to be looked at. You're designing something that's to be felt and to be interacted with and to be touched. And then you're also designing something which is often very embedded in the logic of a story. So, we think very hard about objects and think very hard about detail and everything sort of having a purpose, or at least having telling a story of some, or adding to, a story in some way. And nothing should feel extraneous.
Right. And as I say, if people look at the photographs and then the video of your work, it feels really authentic. It's got that kind of quality to it that if I'm thinking of particularly of a box. There's this sort of box with the like an old fashioned sort of chest or something, and it looks real. It's like the sort of thing that very talented set designers could do. I don't have that kind of skill, but it's the sort of thing that I'd love to be able to do, because it just brings that authenticity to what you're doing.
Yeah, that's that's a big part of what we is the quality of prop and the quality of thought as well is just as important behind that. But yeah, that's always been a big part of our world.
So I've got to ask you a teacher question now, which is when you work, because you work predominantly in primary schools, I understand that's where your work is. So you're working with children right across the primary age range, from reception to year 6. So if you're having this kind of immersive experience, what sort of things can you do so that the children aren't confused and think that it's real? When you go into a theatre, for example, you go into a room, and I can remember the first time we took our children to the theatre. It's like they're sitting there and they're all excited because they don't know what's going to happen, and the lights go down, there's music, and the curtains open. So there's a clear divide between the audience and what's happening with the actors on stage. Even so, they still get very excited, but there's still a clear divide. Whereas in your work, there isn't a clear divide. So what do you do to kind of protect children into that experience?
Well, I mean, in truth, we're trying to create something which does feel real, but we hold the children in the audience throughout. And obviously, I think children, are clever enough and sensible enough at at all ages to know whether or not something is actually real or not. But I think we work quite a lot with the teachers to kind of ensure that they help sort of maintain a fiction. And I suppose what we always do is, in truth, I'd sort of like to try and take children on sort of very magical adventures and make it feel like they have had this thing that's happened to them in their school, which has felt very real. And I think they don't know it's the start of an experience, and they don't, we don't say, and now the show begins. So yeah, in that sense, what we try to do is ease audiences in and then ease them out as well. So we wrap everything up in a way whereby all projects have got a final beat or an end point where there's a communication from the character at the end, or there's a rounding off of things. So I suppose in answer to your question, I think we take great care of the audiences, and we do a lot to kind of make sure that the teachers are trained and are briefed in a way whereby they can support the pupils through that experience. And we talk to teachers about how to we know teachers know their children best and know how children will react. So often it's about briefing the teachers to be able to sort of help look after the children. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, it sort of is played as real. That's the sense that they have gone on a magical experience. But often, you've got children who buy into it at whatever age, but you've got children who are more, for younger children there, to be honest, I think everything is real, isn't it? Everything is weird, everything is strange because every day is new. So, and you're having first. So I think actually they just sort of bound into things. I think we don't, if but the older children are, will often be, how's this happening? And what's going on? And actually it becomes more of a detective story for them, and they want to try and work out that. And actually there's an engagement there. And often children are like, I know this isn't real, but I'm really enjoying going along with it. So I think we don't close that off, but we're not actively saying this is an experience, which, I have had, I've thought long and deep about, I've talked to head teachers about, and a lot of them are like, look, there's a lot of things we do to make life feel magical for our children, and actually there's a huge benefit, and we can see the benefit of kind of going on this journey outweighs the fact that we might feel that we're being disingenuous to children. So that's that's an answer of sorts.
Well, I think it's any work that's like this. There is that question to answer, and I don't believe that there's a right or wrong answer to it. And it certainly shouldn't be an excuse or a reason not to involve children in imaginative experiences, particularly of the richness that you're providing. It's just a question. As I say, it came as a teacher question. It's one of those questions that I'm sure it's not the first time you've been asked it, and it's not the first, and you encounter it whenever you work with children. As you say, children, particularly young children, are still working out the barriers between real and unreal, or fantasy and reality, and they don't have enough experiences of different kinds maybe to work that barrier out. Now, that barrier I remember Lily in particular, my oldest daughter, loved fairies, and so our garden was full of fairies. Now, some of these fairies were little toys that she put out in the garden, but others were just inhabiting her imagination.
Yeah.
Now, you couldn't have had a conversation with Lily at that age to say that fairies weren't real. She just wouldn't have had it. She'd have either she would have got very angry with you because you're an idiot, or she would have got upset.
Yeah.
And neither of those would have been productive. Now, of course, Lily eventually, she's 25 now, at some point she realised that wasn't a reality. It was something that existed in her imagination. But she wasn't bitter about it. She didn't sort of turn to Claire and I and my wife and say, "What were you doing? Why did you do this to me? I'm scarred now that I've turned out that you've lied to me all these years." So I think it's just this kind of area, I think, of anybody who's working like you are in theatre, where particularly if you're breaking down that fourth wall. And I was just interested really in hearing how you kind of negotiate that really or navigate it.
I think it's like caretaking, isn't it? I think what we do spend a lot of time thinking about how you enter and exit a project and how you look after an audience, or how you support teachers to look after an audience. It's and like I said, I think the thing of trying to wrap up if you enter a sort of fictional world, then actually one of the main things is to end it well and actually to bring it to a close. Because I think you open a book, right, and if you read if you read a book and you finished at chapter 5 and you were right in there, and then it just didn't go anywhere, or it's on the cliffhanger, or you've invested quite a lot of your time in it. If you didn't sort of end it and you didn't kind of bring it back round and then sort of close the book, as it were, metaphorically, then I think I think that's what we always try to do, is kind of, because you open a portal, right, and you put children into it, and they need to come back out into the world, and we need to close that and go, okay, we've left changed, and we look at the world differently, but and there is a possibility of, we've opened up a possibility in your mind of magic, but that is shut now.
Right. Okay.
I would say that's the way we look after it. We try to kind of open you try to sort of blow minds, as it were, and kind of go, wow, this is an amazing experience, and I'm completely in it, and I'm on board with it, and I'm working hard to do the things I need to do for it. But actually, there is always a closure. So, there's one project where it's about tiny people, and the final beat of the project actually comes a couple of weeks later, and it's a little tiny letter from the tiny people who thanking them and actually telling the audience that they are safe and that they are being looked after somewhere else. So, you try and a happy ending.
Yeah, of course. And I like the idea of the metaphor of the closing of a book, because I think this is another way that we can protect children into experiences, is in the knowledge that these things are contained within. If it's a book, they're contained within the pages of a book, or you could turn the TV off, or whatever. Or you could leave the theatre and the doors closed behind you. It's important, as you say, to say to them that's contained. It's not chaotic or loose. It can't, it's not still happening. It's finished.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I think that is what we do, and that's part of, and that holds the teachers as well. The teachers who are in, because we will give a gift of a project, as it were, and give it to the teacher to hold and to deliver and support them. And part of that support is making sure that they know when it's over and that they can close that off and manage it. And I think it's about front of house experience. If you applied it to the analogy of theatre, is how do you see your audience in, and how do you see your audience out, and make sure everybody's safe.
Right. So I'd like to talk to you in a little while about the way that this work has now developed into teacher support and training. But that's going to come sort of towards the end of our conversation. But James, as you've listened to some of the podcasts, and James, the format that James has is to sort of open it out a little bit into people's lives and their background and those kind of things. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your life, really, your background, and maybe your school experience, and how you came to this. Could you?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I grew up on the Isle of Wight, and I split my time now. I moved back about 10 years ago. I split my time between the Isle of Wight and London now. Two small rural primary schools. My father was carpenter, and was gamekeeper as well. And my mum, mother, and doing whatever kind of work she could do, and when they work in a cafe, working at the local farm. So I grew up in sort of, rural idyll, as it were. But and I, had a childhood where I got to wander, actually. Got to, play, got to go and get into mischief in quarries, and go and just, wander fields and get on my bike, play. You could just go off on adventures, go and get stuck in bogs, and get up to mischief if I was with the right or the wrong friend. So that was my background, and I didn't, not from a theatrical family in any sense, really. I got into, so I went to a sort of small village primary school, a very small one initially. Actually, I was in a two-class primary school initially. Which was great, actually. It was really, really lovely. And then we moved to another area, and I went to a primary school called New Church Primary School, and that was slightly bigger, still very nice. And I sort of remember various experiences there. One being, the day that they built the spaceship installation in the school, which was essentially just sort of sugar paper and buttons. But me and my friend got very into it, and actually not broke back into the school, but went back into the school, sort of semi-barging past the playground, whoever's on duty, and then going in to turn the spaceship off because we were obsessed that it was going to, it was going to take off or something. But very much interested in small play and dioramas, and kind of Ewok villages, and head filled with Star Wars. So I actually wasn't a particularly academic student. That sort of, I was in a middle school system, so went on to middle school, and then became increasingly interested in drama and performing arts, and was in a number of school plays there. And sort of interesting reflecting on the middle school experience, because the Isle of Wight's actually gone on a transition from middle to high, and it's been an interesting time, let's say, for the education system over the last 10 years there. But it was sort of, that was actually worked in lots of ways, because you sort of have that middle bit before going to sort of big school, as it were. And then went on to a high school.
Before you go on to your high school, I'd just like to go back to you having this kind of freestyle lifestyle, that, of going out. So you're not with any adults at this stage. You're just kind of hanging out together.
Yeah,
you must be quite young by the sound of it.
Well, I suppose crikey, it's sort of a long time ago now, but I would imagine from the sort of age of about 7, 8, we were given the autonomy to be, and actually, the ability to be able to wander up the lane and off up into a field and also with a father whose job was to kind of go into the woods anyway. So sort of you'd be in the woods. So I think it's a thing that a lot of people reflect on, in terms of the amount of, there's those studies, isn't there, about how wide is the radius of your child's life where they can go independently. And we know that's shrunk over the last 50 years or so, massively. So yeah, it was a lot of, there's a lot of resilience there, and there's a lot of having to kind of look after yourself. And, I wasn't wearing, I wasn't bare chested and with a wooden spear in my hand or anything like that. But, we were, that's what I remembered, having that autonomy and being given that autonomy. And actually, my dad talks about, he had a childhood where it was regimented. You've got to be back for tea at this time. And he was like, I was really clear. I didn't want to be that person. Okay. I wanted to kind of give freedom, wanted to be, to not feel like you were constrained. So, yeah. Right. So, I mean, yeah, there was a fair amount of, and obviously with brother, sister, and then, your neighbours, but in a little hamlet away from a road with really a world of nature, and actually at the time a kind of local waterworks system with reservoirs and all kind of weird industrial buildings, which now you look back and go, now they've fenced it all off. But at the time, as kids, you were living in a different world of health and safety. So yeah, there was a freedom there, which I think you take for granted at the time, but you now look back on and think that was a privilege.
And if you think back on that time, do you remember the way that you played was imaginative, that you were playing imaginative games, that you were characters, and you talked about Ewoks earlier, and then, were you playing out stories and imagination?
Yeah, I remember, I think two things are, two sort of examples of remembering. Actually, one was, I think den building is always exciting. So, for example, one time I remember we managed to find a whole bunch of old wooden kind of boxes which housed something to do with waterworks, and we built a massive den. I mean, another time, me and my friend, much to the annoyance of the quarry builders, we built a den in like a sand dune and made it disappear, and then we could just secretly be in there. And one time we actually came up with the myth that there was somebody who lived in the woods who wasn't particularly nice, and actually we convinced ourselves that we'd seen this person, and then we spent the rest of the day sort of running from them or pretending we saw them. So yeah, I think the times when I remember was when you kind of get into something, when you're like, you get kind of go, let's make this base, or let's make that thing, and let's try and put this world together. And actually, when you remember the times you're engrossed, right? You remember the times when you were really busy and you were really enjoying it because it was super exciting. And actually, this was the thing you really want to do, and you really is challenging you and giving you really rich stimulus. So yeah, I do remember getting lost in those worlds and getting I don't know how successful the narratives were, but certainly that sort of working together, that team play as well was the thing.
Yeah, and it feels to me that those kinds of experiences can be formative. It feels that there's a direct line between that, what you've just described there, and and in an animated way. It's something that you look back on and can remember vividly. It is connected to the work that you have done as an adult. Do you see that? I
think, yeah, no, I do. I do see that, and I think you see it when you look back on it. But I suppose for me, I suppose I've lived my life a little bit in time trying to do the things I really enjoy,
right?
Which I know, in some respects, and I didn't come from a family where we'd gone to university, or there was a sort of a route, kind of, okay, yeah, that is what will happen, or this is what is open to you. So I kind of just sort of I muddled my way through a little bit, and actually I didn't necessarily know that where I was going to go in terms of A levels after GCSE. And actually at GCSE I was really interested in drama and really enjoyed that. And I think I enjoy also working together, working with people to create something. That's something I get huge joy out of, not necessarily being like, oh, I've got this idea, we must do it, but more, I've got this idea, how can we make this work together, and how can we all add to it? So I enjoyed drama, and I enjoyed doing it. I could see myself continuing to do it, and that led me into, doing GCSE drama, into doing A-level drama, and then into exploring opportunities of going to universities, and really, went to quite a few interviews and went and really enjoyed, and was lucky enough to get into Exeter University, and the interview process was great. And I think often, like, an interview process says something. If it's a good interview process, it's a good organisation. It was a 2-day process, and you got to work with other students. You got to work with second year students, and then I did that process when I was a second year student, and it was collaborative, and it was, didn't really know at the time, but it was alternative, and it was about sort of company building, and about playful practice, and about thinking outside of the box. So I've kind of followed my nose, and I followed my nose into university. And in fairness, I think if I'd not done drama at university, I'd done something which is slightly more academic, and had needed to be right. You're gonna have 4 hours lectures a week, and then you're gonna spend the rest of your time kind of reading and studying. I think I probably would have found that quite hard to do. But with drama, we were in 30 hours a week, and we had at the time, there were 30, 40 of us in the year, and which is tiny, and it's now about 120. And we were a tight-knit group, and we worked together day in, day out for 3 years. And there was a rigor of, you need to be in to do this work. You can't miss lectures. You can't miss these sessions. And that anchored me, and that anchored me with those people. And it was playful. When in the first year, it was like a kind of introduction to acting, but we played a lot, and we got to know each other. We team built, and that idea of drama and play and connecting to an inner play was very, very fundamental to the work we did. But we sort of rushing through drama and drama at Exeter in some respects. I suppose I got to a point by the end of the second year when I was what I'd describe as, I was a bit fed up of navel gazing. I could obviously see the application of drama and the importance of drama and storytelling, but I was interested in the application of it beyond the stage. So I was, really, really excited by specialising the third year in terms of applied drama, and looking at how you can take this practice into different settings. And we ended up going into what would, I imagine, be referred to now as pupil referral units, working with really challenging behaviour, and reflecting back on it, not necessarily seeing the best practice in terms of practitioners working there, and also working with adults with severe learning disabilities. And at one point, we were all going to work in a prison.
Sorry, just to interrupt you just for a second.
Yeah.
Where are we in terms of, so
we're in third year uni.
Third year. And what year is this roughly?
This is in 99, 2000.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's going on. So there's an applied drama element, and there's a whole bunch of the team who are doing directing, and my friend and colleague Felix Barrett, who's the artistic director of Punchdrunk and the co-founder, was doing work in a very innovative way, taking over an old army barracks and putting a show called Wojciech on. And I happened to be performing in that show, and was sat for 3 nights. I was played the captain, who gets shaved by Wojciech, and I was sat in a room full of hair, literally sort of 4 inches deep in human hair. And Wojciech would come round on a loop every now and again and shave me, and I'd go for a wander. And the audiences would encounter me, and that was my introduction. And I just got so excited by the potential of this. I was, as an exercise for a performer to be enrolled for that long, as an audience being scattered around a building, the kind of transgressive sort of almost illicit feeling nature of being in this space, which held so many memories, and I was charged with atmosphere. So I kind of went out of university and then into sort of setting up Punchdrunk, and very much, trying to help make things happen off the back of that. I mean, that's a sort of fragmented journey through.
I just love this idea of. I think the one thing I tell our kids is, most important thing is you spend your life doing the thing that you want to be doing, if you can. I mean, at times, you have to go and work for McDonald's or Key Markets or something. But you as much as you can, try and do the thing that you want to do. And that sounds pretty much from what you've said that's happened to you, that you've sort of just spent your life.
I've been lucky. Yeah. I've been lucky. It's not necessarily been easy, because a lot of the early years of Punchdrunk, nobody was getting paid, and we were literally then going back to the year after leaving Exeter Uni. We were then going back, and with the sort of support of the university, but not necessarily them approving of everything. We were, basically using some of their MA students, borrowing lights, borrowing vans to try and set up the initial kind of shows that would go on. So, but then, I mean,
so I understood from the way that you told the story that Punchdrunk was something that was already established, but it wasn't, and it was still in the early stages.
Very early, yeah. So sort of established out the back of the of university by Felix is the artistic director with the vision for that work, and then me and a number of others supporting, and that sort of then grew out of Exeter in the southwest to London, and then sort of a number of shows. Fast forward to 2008, 2009, when we've done some collaborations with the National Theatre, Battersea Arts Centre, and we've become funded by the Arts Council, and then I set up Punchdrunk Enrichment. In the meantime, I've also been a teacher. I've also gone back to my old school, my secondary school, and I've trained as a drama teacher.
Ah, right. Yeah. Oh, okay.
And
so how much... Oh, sorry, go on.
And in that time, I've taken my own A-level drama students to go and see very early Punchdrunk work, and seen the impact that it's had on them. And that there's light bulb moments there, and there's light bulb moments for me in seeing. I took my students to see it, and they were just so engaged, having interacted with that work afterwards. They wanted to do it. They didn't stop talking about it. We were coming from the Isle of Wight to London, and you can imagine, you have brilliant conversations with teenagers on the train, but often you're not talking about the work you've just seen at the National Theatre or at the Donmar Warehouse or wherever you've been. But on the way home from these shows, they were buzzing. They'd never seen anything like it. They kept on talking about it. You come into a drama lesson later on the next week, and they want to talk about that. They're engaged, they're enthused. The experience lives on and continues to have a sort of afterglow effect. And I kind of knew really at that moment that there was so much potential to kind of embed this practice within different contexts, albeit it took me, this was back in 2003, 2004, and it took me until, a bit later on in the career to get to the point where I stepped sideways and went, okay, now let's see if we can explore some of those things.
Right. So what you said, light bulb moments. So what's that? Just, I mean, everybody kind of knows what you mean by that, but can you give us an illustrative example? Would that be possible?
What of the one I've just spoken about?
Well, so much more kind of what it was that they experienced that was a light bulb. I mean, I would imagine a light bulb turning their minds.
Yeah.
On,
so there's a show called Sleep No More, and it's still got a life at the moment. It's running in New York, and that's its third version of it. It started in it's basically a retelling of the Scottish play of Macbeth, and it's with Hitchcock, a Hitchcockian influence. And in its initial form, it ran for 2 weeks in an old school in Kennington, and I took my A-level drama students to go and see it. And it's an old school. It's it's and the sort of enter into it. It's dark. You go down a tunnel, and then you basically discover the story of Macbeth scattered across the school, and it's coupled with lots of really powerful physical storytelling and choreography. And we, for these pupils who were, from the Isle of Wight, travelled up, wouldn't necessarily ever get to see this kind of work, and nor would anybody at the time because it was quite new. They were completely bamboozled by it, and just took them so long to process it, and they could only process it by talking to each other because this student had a completely different experience to this student. Did you see that character? No, I didn't see that character. Did you go to that room? No, I didn't go to that room.
Right.
Did you see it when the trees moved and everybody gathered around the table? I didn't see that. But I was up in this room up here and I was looking down on it. And so the connecting of pieces together and the kind of feeling of being embodied and having that visceral response at the point, well, also when you're a young person and you're so open and susceptible to experiences, that they, and probably coupled with the fact, let's be honest, that it was something that I was like, look, I've been involved in this and this is a practice that I've helped to establish. But there, you get back to, so you've got the journey home, and honestly, from start, you've got a 2.5 hour journey home and you've got students talking about work throughout. And that is what you want, right? You want your drama students engaged in critical talk. So, that for me, seeing that, and I didn't necessarily, couldn't see the roadmap at the time, seeing that was like, this is, we've got to keep doing more of this work. And actually, I feel like there is a opportunity to be able to apply this in different ways. Sort of fast forward. So I took a number of trips with students to see that kind of work, and it was always the same. And then that translated into their work, their practical work. They wanted to do, they wanted to imitate it. And then fast forward to when we were working on a show called The Master Red Death at the Battersea Arts Centre, which is a brilliant arts centre in South London. And they had a really good kind of outreach and education department, and they were inviting local primary schools into this set, which was all kind of gothic, Edgar Allan Poe, London and Paris, and the children had tours around this set and they came up with their own stories, and the stories were brilliant. They were rich, they were detailed, they were really evocative. They'd clearly been impacted by being immersed in this world. And that was without even being framed as characters within it. And I just, I kept having these experiences whereby we have to use this practice to do more than to entertain an audience in the evening. It has value. It can, it has value for anybody, but when you can kind of light those light bulbs in young people, when you can make them storytellers, when you can give them experiences which allow them to write creatively and think about themselves as creative beings, and allow teachers to see their students in different lights, then there's huge value in that. And we sort of my mission from 2008 until now has been to kind of really explore that practice in lots of different ways, and to try and have those light bulb moments, those moments of awe and wonder in lots of different spaces and settings. And I've been, I'm privileged to be in a place where I've kind of got to marry that applied approach with the immersive approach. And, I'm now, we now sit as a very independent charity from Punchdrunk, who are more commercial. And we take this, we've got a very distinct mission to sort of take this work into schools, to work with families and to work with communities. And we're very, interested in taking this work to places where it's needed most. And we're quite selective about that.
Right. So well, I'd like to talk to you about that in a bit more detail in a little while, but just something I'd like to discuss with you, and then maybe this isn't going to be much of a topic, but I just wanted to ask you really, how much have you or your team or anybody associated with you, perhaps through Paul Hamlin, has theorized this? Because the thing that stood out from that last bit that you described was the difference between the students' experience when they were going to a formal theatre event, and when they were going to these more immersive and different kinds of experiences. And something else that you said earlier about play, the importance of play, and not only in your own life and the way that the imaginative play informed you and was a formative experience for you, but also for children, that's something that you discussed as being an important thing. And I often think of the way that play and theatre are part of the same, they're connected. If you think about when you go to the theatre, you go to see a play, the actors were called players back in the time of Shakespeare. It's not an accident that those two words are so closely associated, but that they are, so the difference between you going off and building dens and going to watch Shakespeare is still on the same continuum, but it's about formality. What you're doing is informal, very informal, and then there's a formality, obviously, at the theatrical Shakespeare end. But the experiences that Punchdrunk were doing or are doing feels to be further away from the formal end, more towards the informal, but not all the way down there. So, do you see what I mean? It's and I wonder if it's something to do with, well, two things really. One is to do with agency. The agency that the people had, that those students had, was to experience it in the order that they chose. And as you say, sometimes they missed out on things, and sometimes they saw something that somebody else didn't see. But also, you're not explaining everything. You don't see everything at once. So there's curiosity there as well as agency. I don't know whether any of that is something that you've thought about or theorized.
No, we've worked with a researcher over a number of projects called Angela Colvert. She was formerly of the University of Roehampton, Dr. Angela Colvert, formerly of Roehampton and now Sheffield. And we did a project called The Oracles, which is a project which started in a computer game and then came to a physical environment in a space we had in Tottenham back in 2017, 2018. And you basically got Angela on board to say, look, go on the journey of this project with us, and it's innovative. It's playing around with sort of cross-platform storytelling. We want to, let's just see what emerges in terms of what you want to explore from it. And actually, until this point, I hadn't really considered it in this way, but Angela started to come up with this idea of immersive play and this model of immersive play and how you can get children into a state where they are playful, and the different constituent parts of that. So we've conceptualized it in that way. So I think for me that then there's lots of different ways you can think about how you create that and the tools you use there, which I don't have to hand today, but that does exist. So thinking about it in terms of immersive play and in terms of play was an important sort of development for us. And then looking at how that you can construct those experiences. We're really very much with the child at the centre. So it's very, in terms of thinking about the work as child-centred and kind of the child at the experience of the centre of the experience. You build the experience around them. But what we found from that research was also that the children were beginning to take the play that they were experiencing in that computer game and in the live episodes that we told them into the outside world. So it's beginning to affect the way that they interacted and became more playful in the outside world. And we did that project with Key Stage 2 children, traditionally, who are no longer playing as much. And actually a lot of the feedback we got from the children and from teachers was that it was brilliant for those children to be able to enter into play, because they're getting to that point where they transition into secondary school. So we've conceptualized it around the idea of immersive play. So and we've got a research paper connected to one of the projects I think we'll talk about, which is titled sort of playful pathways of inquiry. So we think about play quite a lot. We think about imaginative play, but there is a lot of agency in there as well, and it is about making children feel like they've got agency. And I suppose the sort of other constituent elements that we're pulling out quite a lot is this, what we call the 3 Ps. So the work having an impact in terms of positivity, in terms of possibility, and in terms of purpose. So we're interested in making people feel good about themselves and about the actions and about the work that they're doing and about school, making possibility in terms of aspiration and inspiration and imagination, and then purpose in terms of, and I know you'll be very keen on purpose, Tim, in terms of your work with the Mantle, the expert, this idea of really embedding purposeful reasons to do work at school within that and really understanding your purpose. Because we have thought about it, and we are doing quite a lot of work. There's a paper coming out called Playful Pathways. It's just in draft at the moment, and then we've got a longitudinal evaluation of the sort of impact of our work and looking at it very much in terms of those 3 Ps. So there's you're right in terms of you give enough but not everything, and actually there's a filling in of gaps. That's always, and that might be, in the example I gave, that's about space, but in the example of the work in primary schools, that can be imaginatively filling in gaps in your mind, or that can be more often than not, it's about turning children's minds onto the possibility of things that exist around their space. And actually, when you flick something in somebody's mind and they begin to look at the world in a different way, that's quite powerful. So when they begin to see possibility and imaginative possibilities, but I think the other thing being, I think the important thing with the work is giving really rich experience, which makes you want to talk and makes you need to explain and makes you have to process, and allowing also for teachers to be on the same footing as children as they encounter these things, because often, so there's a democratization, as it were. Even if teachers do know a bit more of where you're going, that actually you're standing shoulder to shoulder with your children as you encounter this work. And actually something quite powerful there for a child to see themselves as an equal, standing next to the teacher, and as the teacher going, look, I don't know what's going to happen next, let's find out. I'm as interested as you are. And actually for teachers to see themselves like that, and you begin to see one another in a different way. So, I mean, that's a bit rambly maybe, Tim, but...
No. Well, I think, as I say, it occurred to me to ask the question, but I think it's interesting hearing you sort of unravel this, because I think it in here is as you say, there's a kind of maybe an overlap between the interests that I have through the work that I do with Mantle the Expert and what you're doing, with enrichment theatre, and I think one of the things that both of our work does is to bring urgency and importance. So Dorothy Heathcote, who was the inventor of Mantle the Expert, said that school's a little bit like a waiting room, that you're doing things for a time in the future, you're practicing things for a time in the future when they'll be important, but they're not really important today. That's controversial, but I think it's a good way of thinking about that school can be a little bit like a waiting room, whereas what's happening with the the arrival of these pebbles and then the story behind them, the stones, and the story behind them is that there's something that needs sorting out now. It's not a practice, it's not a rehearsal, we're not in a waiting room, it's now, and it's important if you care about it. And there's tension, and of course theatre has to involve tension, and I think that's it. That introduction of that quality into the classroom is both an enrichment and can be transformative.
Yeah, I think that's the sense of time, the sense of urgency, and theatrically thinking about how you make somebody care about that is, and therefore how do you introduce that? How do you frame them within it? And, for example, we've got a project called A Small Tale, which is a teacher-led project, completely led by a teacher, starts in a storybook, and teacher reads the storybook, and it's about two miniature borrower-sized people who are mischievous and who like stories and like libraries. And it sort of ends with them saying the last they were seen was on the banks of the Mississippi River. Some tiny footprints and a little picture of a raft. And teacher reads it, does a bit of comprehension, puts the book on their desk, leaves it open, come back the next day. Tim, will you just go and get that book we were reading yesterday? Maybe you could read it out for the class? And lo and behold, the pages are blank. And all that remains are some inky footprints which trail off the page and across the desk. And this is strange. And lo and behold, when the teacher sort of is turning the book upside down and trying to work out what's going on here, a letter falls out. And there's a page written in child's handwriting in the back saying care instructions for Abe and Alba. Do not leave this book open. Oops. And then they work, and then there's a letter from a 7-year-old child, not too dissimilar in age to them, that's saying, yeah, look, if you find this book, be careful. It's got a type of magic. There's some characters in it. And if you leave it open, they will escape. But don't worry, I'm going to tell you how you're going to get them back in. And it's all contained within this letter, which is framed as real. And so it gives you the kind of code to break it. And then, so this happens for a week. And there's a number of different installations that appear around the school. So we find a campsite of Abe and Alba in the head teacher's office. There's a bunch of pencils that have gone missing from the classroom next door, and the teacher comes in and they're a bit angry about it. There's an announcement in assembly about somebody's been stealing socks, and only this class knows. So they find a campsite outside and some magpie feathers, and there's a sense that the magpie might have taken them, but then they find a little miniature zip line, and it's clear they've escaped. So we ramp up the tension, and then in the end, the children all write stories about Abe and Alba, and they lay them out on the floor, a big trail all the way down the hallway to the book, propped open by a pencil. Lo and behold, Monday morning comes around. They're restored, they're back in the book, and they send the book back to the 7-year-old child, who's now much older, and it fictionally takes, and then we wait actually, and then we get a letter back saying, thank you so much for returning this book. I lost it actually a long time ago, so I wondered where it had gone to, but it seems like it went to a good home. And I've been looking after Abe and Alba actually. We've got an agreement where I let them out each night, and as long as I write a story about them and read it to them, they'll come back in. And then they've got that little tiny letter, which is all miniature, actually written out in miniature words from Abe and Alba, thanking them, and the children will get a little gift from them as well, which they carry with them. So gift is important for us, that kind of tangible thing that you hold on to remember. So yeah, there's always a reason to be, you buy into it. You get buy-in, and then you give purpose to those children writing stories. And the stories might not be we're not teaching grammar and punctuation and spelling, but a lot of the work we've done, you get teachers, you get parents saying, what's going on? Because my child's come home and they won't stop talking about school, and they won't stop writing stories. And you've got children who don't talk or don't come out of themselves in class, talking and coming out of themselves and being more vocal than teachers have ever seen them before. And you've got them writing, where they might write one paragraph, reluctantly, they're writing reams. And you flip that switch in a child's mind. You give them that real reason. You give them that imaginative stimulus. And I think the other thing here is that it happens in a child's school. It doesn't happen at home. There's lots of experiences that lots of children have where they have rich experiences outside of school, and do all sorts of things which feed the soul and feed the imagination. That's not a given for every child. No. And actually, unless you've got that, those experiences, then it's very hard to write of them. And then also, unless you've had that experience which validates you and says that this thing has come because you are important, and this thing needs your imagination and it needs your work. You are a writer. You are important in this world, and only you can do this. That validation is hugely important, because it says to the child, I'm important. I can be a writer. I've been told that I can be a writer. I'm told I've got a powerful imagination. And I need to do this thing. If I don't, then we won't save the young people. And that's it. I think that's the thing that's flip switches. Now, that's the importance of doing this thing in schools, is that, you might not get that experience anywhere else. For some children, that's a huge generalization. I know, children of all socioeconomic circumstances will be having all sorts of different rich experiences in all sorts of different ways. But we know that, we know the gap between pupil premium. We know the gap between free school meals and those who aren't. And we know that the more you can do to build cultural capital and to give experience which create the opportunity for rich writing and engagement, and give that validation and that sense of importance, the better. So
I think there's something more that you're doing there, though. There's a Native American idea. I don't know if you come across it, about one of the important things about it's called the circle of courage, and it's one of the important components about feeling like you belong to a community. Is having the opportunity to be generous.
What's that,
a circle of courage, it's called. And I've thought, for a long time, I've thought about the importance of this thing about the opportunity to be generous. In your project that you've just described there, the children are the generous ones. In the other ones that you describe as well, it's the same thing, is that the children are, they are motivated and they're interested and they can see the importance of it and all the rest of it. But the way that you've orientated it means that they're the ones that can solve the problem. They're the ones who can be the generous ones, the experts, there's a whole load of things going on there that maybe in school we don't focus on enough. Is that the importance of how can children contribute to in ways that make a difference to the community and to others, and that, I think, is an important factor in what you've described there. Maybe one of the reasons why you see such a positive response from the students.
Yeah, I think we often sort of use the phrase children as experts, and that's as much in the positioning of the role we give them. And often, so for example, in a project that we do called the Miniature Museum, and I'm going to give a shout out to my colleague Tara Boland, who is the queen of teacher-led work, who created this project. The Miniature Museum is about local history. So we've got a whole school teacher-led project. Miniature Museum turns up at school, and basically there's all sorts of different departments, but the sport, there's science, there's history, and there's folklore, and the folklore section escapes at some point and we have to get it back in. But the way we get it back in, the way we get this animal called the Brogan back in, is by faking local treasure. And the work that the children have done before that, it's all about finding out about their local area. So only in finding out about their local area have we engineered them to become the experts, and only they can then therefore fake a piece of local treasure and go, well, this ring belonged to this dignitary who used to live around the corner, and they lost it when they were running to the meeting that they had, or whatever it is. But they are the experts. And then this mythical being, the Brogan, there's a sort of moment, a ritual where they put these items within this box and they draw the Brogan back in. But the children have to feel like only they can do it. They are, often we talk about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and then sort of like children suddenly being endowed with this special power that they didn't know they had before, which is sort of a useful way of looking at it. But yeah, they're the protagonists. They're the reason this story's happening, and actually the only way this story can resolve is by them. So you then are reverse engineering a lot of our work. It's like, well, why would this thing arrive? Why would it need the children?
Yes.
And if we can't answer that question, and then we can't translate that to a kind of outcome in terms of the work they need to do, then we have to go back and start again. So yeah,
Right.
they have to. I mean, that's the thing, right? When you believe you can make a difference at school, when you believe what you're doing can make a difference, and actually in terms of the structure of our work, when you see that what you do changes something, then you want to do it again, because there's a sort of feedback, call it a dopamine hit or whatever, but you kind of feel the importance of your work. And obviously I know that with the work that you do, Tim, the mantle, that's exactly what you're doing as well, because you can process drama style as well. You can layer the next level. We've done that, and actually this has come back as a consequence of it. So what do we do? And you're working hard to kind of reinforce that reality for the children, but knowing that only they can do it because because only they're being asked to do it. And actually the teacher doesn't know. It's not addressed to the teacher, it's addressed to the pupils. The teacher doesn't know any more than you. So, I'm looking to you guys for support here. And I think it is that, like I said, it's that shoulder to shoulder thing with the teachers and the pupils, and the teacher going, look, I'm in the same position as you. In actual fact, you know more than me. So I'm going to facilitate you on this journey.
So, Peter, I'd like to ask you now about the work that you're doing directly with teachers in terms of teacher development and support to enhance the work that Punchdrunk Enrichment have been doing.
Yes. So ever since we've been doing the work, the thing that was evident from the very beginning was that teachers wanted to be able to continue the practice. They wanted to be able to continue the project. So they wanted legacy. So they were asking what next. So a very early example of sort of how teachers took on the mantle of creating work or carry on work was we did a project called Under the Eider Down, which was a bric-a-brac shop that turned up at your school, and children were given a drink of moon juice, which was story water, which is a little bit of honey, lemon, and story waters of the moon. And kept going back to that school quite a lot over the years, and bump into Wayne, the teacher, and he'd go, I'm still giving the kids moon juice. We still use it as a storytelling elixir. So we were always trying to look at what teachers could do next, and sort of always building a legacy element into our project. So, for example, when we worked on a project called the Lost Ending Library, which has gone all over London and been up to Scotland and over to Australia as well. The Lost Ending Library essentially jumps from place to place looking for great imaginations and new stories. And actually, we built a number of different legacy tools, like a big map of the world where you could see where the library had gone all over the world, set of postcards so that the library could communicate with continue to communicate with the schools. Teachers would facilitate the writing of those themselves. And they would send missions from the library sort of saying, look, library needs new stories about whatever it was it needed. Can you furnish us with them? And then, the children would start writing about them. So there was always a sense that the practice could go further, and that the teachers were hungry for this style of work. And often, this was get the comments like teachers like, this is why I went into teaching. This is the kind of project I wanted to be doing. This is the kind of imaginative journey I wanted to take my pupils on, and that's why I want to carry it on. So I always knew that there was a need to kind of try and quench that thirst, really, for this practice in schools. And so, early projects, installation projects we built. Then we moved to doing teacher-led projects, like we talked to Miniature Museum today. We've talked about Small Tale, and we've got 4 of those now. And obviously, my big thing is about sustainability. We can't be in every school. we can't do the library project, we can't do the Route 158 Amish travel project in every school all over. We can't. But what is it that we can do that teachers? How can we endow in sort of give teachers the knowledge and the experience to do things themselves? And over the past 3 years, we've been doing a project called the Immersive Learning Collective, where we've worked with 17 schools across London. And we've sort of taken them on a 3-year journey where we started, they pretty much all of them, to some degree, had done work with us before. They've bought into this thing. And we took them on a 3-year journey whereby each year we would deliver a project with them, and each year that project would sort of be developed with them. So and first year we talked about myths and rituals. So there's always a project, so there's always a kind of piece of our practice to hold on to. But first year we talked about myth and ritual. So how can we create myths in the classroom or myths in our school? How can we create rituals? We had a little we talked about furrow stones earlier. Furrow stones were actually born of a ritual that we came up with, to sort of a stone that you rub to kind of help you to sort of ignite your imaginative powers. If you read a little kind of mantra as you said it, and so we did, and we looked at small techniques that you could use as teachers to kind of make things feel real in your school. Small ways in which you could change your classroom, whether that was sort of turning down the lights, whether that was disrupting the order of your furniture. And then year 2, and then teachers began to experiment with that. Year 2, we looked at, then I must say at this point, COVID hit. So we had a sort of year 1.5, but then year 2, we looked at co-creation. So we sat down with early years foundation teachers, and we had started with a blank page. I had to say to the team who were creating, I was like, don't do anything before you meet the teachers. And we took the teachers on a journey of co-creating a project called the Wishing Cupboard. And we worked directly with teachers to take them on that journey. Not all the time, obviously, with key points. And we trialed work in schools so they could see how this creative practice developed. Also during that year, we introduced them to Weaverlania, and we took them right back to basics. Actually, we said, look, how do you, before you do anything in the classroom, come up with a myth, come up with a story. It's going to be rooted in this world called Weaverlania. So we took them to, they had to begin to write that story, which would give the logic and the rationale for any project. And then in year 3, we did something called an independent design. And we basically worked alongside the teachers. We had a director and a designer mentor who worked with key teachers at the school. And the aim was to get to a place where they would design and deliver their own immersive projects in school. And we managed to do it. Yay. So the first cohort went last year, and the next cohort are actually going this year as part of the final ILJ and ILC project coming together. So and that's where the Playful Pathways research project comes into play that Angela and her colleague Lisa have also been working on, Angela Colvert and Lisa Stevenson. So that's been really about trying to create a pathway through our practice to get teachers to a point where they are able to create and deliver their own projects. And a lot of the work we've done in terms of our training has been it's been a bit meta. So you kind of create a training frame or a fictional agency which they become part of to kind of demonstrate the kind of thing that they might do and the way they might frame their own pupils. So we're trying to do effective training where you're feeling it and you're in it as much as you're learning, and that's the way you learn about it as well. So they sort of become embodied. So yeah, that's been a way of trying to get to the bottom of like, how far can we take this? Can we get to a point where we've got teachers who are embedding these techniques and creating these projects in a sustainable way. And I think that's the important word, in a sustainable way, because we're working in a sector which is time poor and low on resource in lots of ways, although with, you know, rich resource and resilience in other ways as well.
Right. So from some of the things that you've just described there seem to be directly related to the way that theatre works. So you were talking about dimming the lights, you know, or moving the furniture around in different ways, or you know, using story to frame things that are happening, events that are happening. So, and other things you're talking about as well, like the magic drinks and the pebbles, and these are all kind of things that you see in theatre, aren't they? They're so. I am going to arrive at a question in a minute, but I'm kind of thinking through what you said and how it kind of breaks down, really. I think of classrooms very much as theatre space. So you've got somebody at the front, and then you've got the people in the chairs, but it is a theatrical space, really. It's controlled and all the rest of it, but it's not limited. And the you know, you talk about resources, but I think the greatest resource that we have in classrooms is imagination, because imagination can take you anywhere, be anyone at any time, doing anything. And if what it sounds like what you're doing in your work with teachers is to help them realize, or to learn some of the techniques that you learn as a theatre practitioner, and the people who make theatre, you know, all the other things that you do to bring stories alive, to make them something that you want to engage with. Does that sound about the sort of right sort of thing, or am I?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I was, you know, like I said to you earlier, I listened to your podcast with James and about your work, and the imagination is the most important tool we have, and actually a really, really fantastic tool within the classroom. And if we can open teachers' eyes to how they can engage their own professional imagination, and see themselves as imaginative beings, and also unlock the power of children's imaginations, then that's a good way of describing it. So I think, and we are doing that by trying to kind of teach them the tricks of our trade, but at the same time, the tension of that is trying to do it in a way where you give them the tools where they can frame it within their theatre. I like that. I think you're right. You know, it's very theatrical being a teacher. It's very, you know, there's the same level of preparation in lots of ways in terms of how you deliver things. So we're very much looking at how they can turn their classrooms, you know, how they can amp up that theatre, as it were, or how they can re-lens, sometimes is a word we use quite a lot, kind of re-lens the school, or re-lens the classroom, or re-lens your relationship with space. So often you're not even trying to, you use the imagination to bring a sense of possibility alive. So you're not, and we're trying to do things where you're not having to change everything, but like I said this earlier, you change the way people look, they see themselves or the space. So, and that's a switch in your imagination. That's a switch in you going, oh God, oh yeah, imagine where that character could be now, or imagine the possibilities of the space where we might go, and you know who I might be. So I think, yeah, it is about them becoming more theatrical and seeing the potential of being theatrical and actually feeling they can do it.
Right. So do you find that teachers, you said earlier that they, you know, you've heard teachers say, well, this is why I went into teaching, which is quite an interesting thing to say, isn't it, really? It's a sort of, you know, what is, I mean, I completely get it. I can, we could talk about what they meant by that, but we're not here. But I completely understand why someone might say that. So do you find that teachers are open? I mean, not open is not the right word. I'm sure they're open, otherwise they wouldn't be joining the project. But I mean, do they find it hard to overcome the barriers, as it were, of the curriculum and the timetable and resources and all those other things that operate within the system?
Yeah, no, I think that is that all. There's a whole bunch of barriers they need to overcome. I think there's a huge, but I think that the thing is they do get there. I suppose what's interesting for us is that they don't necessarily get there in the way that we get there. So
Right.
often there's I was working with my colleague Joanne, who's worked really closely on this project with me, and we were sat there going, God, I wonder if anybody's going to end up making something. Because we were sort of talking to our mentors and going, where are they at? And what's going on? And what's the status there? And there were time was a big barrier, actually,
Right.
and money is a big barrier. But do you know what the main? It wasn't a barrier, but a main thing for a lot of people to get there. It was difficult for people to get their head into was why is this thing happening, and what is the work that the children need to do to solve it? And actually, so that was the big barrier. So it's trying to get people to just sort of really simplify it, because often they come up with this idea where something was coming and it was going to be really elaborate and it was going to be doing this and it was we're going to transform this room, and actually they hadn't really gone, well, why? And so there's sort of it wasn't a barrier, but a sort of a challenge was that sort of dramaturgical approach of terms of going, okay, let's just boil this down. What are the constituent parts here? We've got a character who needs this, and they need stories, or they need elements from history, or they need paint and color to change their world. How are they? What can the children give, and why have they arrived here? And it was often sort of getting lost. The tension was more like you wanted teachers to make mistakes and kind of go down rabbit holes which were dead ends, but that was actually one of the biggest barriers, was to try and get them to kind of get to a point where they'd taken an idea which was sort of quite fantastical and exciting, but it wasn't actually anchored or rooted in that sort of framing the audience in the right way and actually framing the learning in the right way, because that's the thing that makes a lot of our work successful, is that there's a reason for the children to do the work. And actually, if there isn't a reason for the children to do the work, or a reason for the children to be there in that experience, and that's not framed correctly, then they won't feel that thing you're talking about in terms of the feeling of belonging and children as being generous. So that was a barrier. I mean, as was
just before you move on, this idea of framing, I think, is something that people from theatre, it's a word that you use, and you have a clear understanding of what that means.
Yeah.
It took me a while as a teacher to appreciate quite what that meant. Could you maybe explain that? Because
I'll
say,
try.
that's a key. Well, I get exactly. It's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
But as you say, it's something I think that is different from teaching, is that we don't tend to, well, of course we are, if you get right down into the theoretical side of things, we are framing things all the time, because we are, but we're not conscious of it. Whereas in theatre, you are conscious of it. So could you explain perhaps how that works?
Yes, exactly. So I think when you're if we go back to our analogy of sort of a more formal traditional theatre setting, the framing is quite simple in that you come to a theatre, you've paid for your ticket, you sit down, and you're going to be entertained. Things are going to happen. When you're stepping into a story, or a story is happening to you, as a theatre maker, you have to think differently about that, because you have to sort of, for example, just trying to think of for example, with the Lost Lending Library project that we've done quite a lot, there needs to be a rationale for the library to come to the school. And the week before the library arrives, a librarian comes to school and they do a workshop on books and often do a workshop on what would you like your library to look like. And share a book bag, get out a book, Colin Thompson, How to Live Forever. It's got an amazing library in it. And the children all go, oh, we've read that. We've read that. We know that book. We create a connection between those two characters. Oh, great. Oh, brilliant. I love this book. So, and then lo and behold, they talk about that quite a lot. And that looks quite a lot like the Lost Lending Library, actually. But that arrives at school over the weekend. Head teacher's office is transformed. Bookshelf appears where there was once a door. Emergency assembly. Librarian comes back in. Head teacher phoned me up and told me what had happened here. I'm gonna investigate and I'll come and find you if I need you. And then what transpires is that the library has come to their school because it's focused on our imagination and it's heard about all the stories that they've been talking about and it needs to collect stories from them. So we've built up a reason and a rationale for that project to arrive, and for that project to need the pupil. So essentially we've cast the pupil and we cast the work that they're going to need to do within the story. So you build, and that's the thing of we've got a problem, we do some work, there's a reward, and then that cycle can start again, if you like. Or you do a bit of work and then it reveals the next bit of narrative. And then you do a bit more work and it reveals the next bit of narrative. And actually you understand yourself as part of a story. So you have to frame the need for, the big thing for us is you have to cast the children within the story that you're telling.
Yes.
The story can't go forward without the work of the children. So
I think this is the thing, you see. You're using another technical word, cast, which
yes,
but it's in the explaining of these things, I think, that makes it clear. It is that the work that you're talking about isn't so much in the coming up with the idea of the lending library. That's important, obviously it is, or the secret lending library. But it's the work that you do in order to build up to that. It's the as you said, that's the framing of it.
Yeah.
Because you can't take them into a theatre. A theatre, as you say, has got a clear frame, or a cinema, or a book, or whatever. They're all framed very clearly. You have to build a frame in a different way.
Yeah.
And that's not something that teachers typically do. They don't think in those ways. And there's also this idea of casting. Obviously a theatre, when you go to see a play, you have the cast list, but casting is the sort of the placing or the positioning of the children as people or agents within the fiction. Is that the way that?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I think the important thing, though, and especially with a lot of work that does this, is you have to cast the children as themselves. I know it sounds really obvious, but they have to be, in terms of this work, you cast them as themselves, but they become a really brilliant version of themselves, and they become the superheroes, become the protagonists within it. They become the people who solve the mystery. So because you're writing. And so, and we always say this, don't we? When you go to a theatre, it's never complete until you've got the audiences there. But actually, with the work we do, it's never complete until you've got the character of the children within it, and we can't actually get going until we've got that character. And we're writing a role for them, and we've got to support them and the teachers to be able to take the children on that journey. In some respects, you write. It's like Dungeons and Dragons, and there's a campaign, and the teacher, and the teacher is the dungeon master in some respects, not necessarily in a dice roll kind of way, but they know the campaign, they know where they're going, and you're trying to get them to a place where they've got the fictional frame of play that they can then guide the children through. And I think, again, I think it's similar to Mantle of the Expert in terms of that you've got that when you're entering into that kind of work, because you've got that world which anchors you, and you know where you might go with it. There's lots of different ways you could go with it, but there's a landscape, an imaginative landscape.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And when I first came across Mantle of the Expert, one of the things that one of the models that I thought about was Dungeons and Dragons. I played Dungeons and Dragons at school, and I was like, oh, this is Dungeons and Dragons. This is really cool, and because it's role play. I mean, role play gets very bad press in my view. You get derogatory things about role play because people imagine it's kind of pretending to be in an interview or something. That's only a bit of what role play is, but it is the taking on of a point of view within a fiction. That's really what role play is, and this sense of being people, as you say, who are very much ourselves. I mean, Mantle of the Expert doesn't ask the children not to think of themselves. That's actually completely opposite of what it's trying to do. But it's trying to think of themselves as people with power, people who can make a difference. That's why it's called the Mantle of the Expert, because they're people with responsibility. And it's very, very close. The more you talk about the work that you're doing, it's different in the sense that you've got this much, I think, on this spectrum I was talking about earlier, you're much closer to the theatre end.
Yes,
the Expert is, because we don't tend to use any kind of theatrical props. But it's the reason I'm interested in kind of digging into your experiences of working with teachers in terms of teacher development and teachers adopting these approaches into their classrooms is because that very much occupies my time. Is I think, how can I explain how this works, and how do you sort of say, well, it's not so much the story. The story is really important. It's more about the steps into the story. It's how you bring the children into that. I'll stop talking now. So
no, you're right. It's all about. You can think about it like a really good computer game. The first level of a really good computer game teaches you how to play the game.
Yes.
And actually, if you can create, we often talk about doing this kind of work. Do you do it as a kind of wow moment at the start of a topic, or do you actually do it at the end of a topic of work where you consolidate learning? Because actually, if you lay out all of the tools and the skills and the knowledge that you'll need to solve something that happens at the end, then actually it's a brilliant way of kind of embedding all of that knowledge in a way that you'll not forget that, and it's got real purpose and it's got real energy. And then alongside it with the work, what we're trying to do is you're trying to make it joyful and just having fun and doing something which is unexpected. So no, you're right. It's about structuring. It's about structuring a way in, but it's also about positioning learning in a way that has purpose, and that children feel motivated and engaged and want to do it. And then we just know that when that happens, that the quality of engagement might not flow through to kind of the quality of it might not be the sort of most precise work, but that kind of a child engaging in a topic and really going at it and being really engrossed at it for is going to be the thing that unlocks actually coming to understand it, because you've got to go through the learning pit or whatever. You've got to kind of get through something. You've got to work something to get it. So I think that's my thing is about really. Life is sort of passive. It can be quite sedentary in school, and actually, children are much better when they're active, and they're engaged and they're enjoying it. And you see that. And actually, when you have teachers go, "I've never seen my child like that before. I can't. I've never heard the buzz of this around the school. I've never, you've got parents coming in going, well, can you tell me what's going on at school at the moment? Because my child just come home and just won't stop talking about this. And my child never talks about school. There's you've got children who are borderline elective mute who are speaking, and I think you begin to see, when you do work like this, you begin to see children in a different light. And actually, one of the things that we always stood quite firm on early on was a lot of the work, the children went into the installation on their own, without any adult, aside from the performer, who was obviously DBS checked and safe, and the safeguarding was there. But it was a child-only experience. And a lot of the time you had teachers who were going, Tim's not going to cope with that.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, that they won't be able to do that. And they were projecting and we were saying, look, let's just, I understand that. Let's see what happens. And let's give this child a chance. And I tell you what, 99% of the time, that child waltzed into there and waltzed out and had the best time and was able to moderate their behaviour, was able to cope with this thing, which teachers felt they couldn't cope with because it was delivered in a different way. It was like you were putting the kind of metric and the lens of a classroom environment, a traditional way of delivery, on top of this thing which was not traditional and completely collapsed its hierarchies and, you know, its sensory and completely different way of delivering content in school. And children respond to that because it is different, and they've got the freedom and they feel empowered that it's their space.
And so do you have the teachers still staying out, or do you have them coming in? Because I was just thinking that if I was a teacher, I'd love to be in there, not to control things or moderate the behaviour, but just to kind of watch and see.
No, that's the tension.
See what was happening.
Yeah, no, we do more now. It's that was early on. That was the kind of conundrum there, because the teacher was like, I want to come in, and you do, and actually, like I said, obviously with the teacher-led work, the teachers are there. They're with the children throughout. They're actually playing along with them. So no, there is with all the work, we've always made sure that teachers have time to go and see and experience the project, and actually get to be that childlike. I mean, the other thing is, at the end of the day, they'll come in and see it as well, and they'll get their own session, and actually they get to be childlike. And that's the thing that you often hear, is that children and parents who come and see it are transported to feeling childlike again. And actually, you know, that therein lies, and actually often with kind of getting new head teachers to come and see work and to take it on board. You know, I can talk all day long about it, but come along and experience it.
Show, not tell.
Yeah, exactly. And then they do, and they're like, okay. And actually, a lot of the work initially was spread by word of mouth, because you have one head teacher going, "Oh, I just had this thing, and I think it'd be brilliant for your school." And that was the way you got a head teacher calling us up to go, "I've got an animated teacher who's telling me I must have this thing. Can you tell me what it's about?"
Right. So sort of broadening out a little bit then, because you were talking earlier about that the funding for your work, in part, I think, comes from Paul Hamlin, from the Paul Hamlin Foundation. And is that still ongoing? Are you still being funded by them?
So we got we're coming to the last year of funding on this current programme. So there's a grant called the More and Better grant, which looks at arts education in schools, and we were really looking at how we could be present in schools for a period of time, in this period, 3 academic years, 4 calendar years, and how could we, you know, be strategically doing work in these schools, working with schools to address their strategic priorities, and also measure the longitudinal impact of this work in their schools. So they funded that project, and the schools make a small contribution. And that funding is coming to an end at the end of calendar year 24, and this academic year is the last year of that project.
Right. So I'm not really going to talk about the sustainable. I'm not going to ask the sustainable question. Let's leave that. But I'm more interested really in, you know, hopefully, I'm going to nail my colours to the mast. Hopefully, there's going to be a change of government over the next few months, maybe shorter, maybe longer. Do you feel that you could affect a wider sort of conversation around education, and do you feel like you're in a position where, you know, you might be able to communicate to schools on I don't know, national level about how to integrate some of these things into educational experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. If we were going to do it at any point, it's going to be this time. Well, just under a year away, really. Like autumn 2024, our ILC program and ILJ program, our Immersive Learning Collective and Immersive Learning Journeys, will come to an end. We've got our Playful Pathways Inquiry, Playful Pathways of Inquiry research, which looks at the ILC, where we've been exploring what it means to be an immersive teacher, what it means to be an immersive school, what an immersive curriculum means. And then we'll also have 3 years of data from our ILJ project, which is longitudinal impact of this work in schools. So we'll have a piece around what does it look like in terms of impact for pupils in schools? What does it look like when you empower teachers to do this practice? And we're in the process of developing a piece of work which will kind of bring those two lungs together, called what we're currently got as working title sort of Immersive Learning Manifesto. So taking the kind of good bits of that and going, look, this is what happens when you do this work. This is what happens when you give teachers time to be creative, to be playful, to embed arts-based practice, theatrical, immersive-based practice in their classrooms, in their schools. And this is what we are going to do about it. And this is what we invite you to come on board and to be part of that. And I sort of see that initiative as something called the School of Enrichment. So essentially a space, an imaginative space that embodies our work. And it might be in the form of you as a teacher coming on some training, just thinking about how they might embed this practice. It might be doing a project. It might be them working as a school to develop your own practice. And we'll sort of framing it around that and to sort of trying to create an ethos and a pedagogy of sorts, albeit sort of draws from lots of different things, which then teachers can begin to adopt. That's the ambition, and we're sort of, ask me this time next year how successful we feel we've been at kind of being able to articulate that. But I think it would certainly be asking for there to be more space and time to allow teachers to be creative and to be playful, and to be imaginative, and to and not necessarily about teaching the arts, but about using arts-based practice as an approach to being able to really unlock the best in pupils and the best in teachers, because I feel that is sidelined at the moment, and I don't feel that teachers are given that space. And the work that we have done has shown that when you've got progressive leaders who value imagination and value these approaches, that teachers can and will adopt this practice. We've seen, an amazing example of a school called Wyborn School, who transformed a whole classroom of their school, which was surplus to requirement in terms of used to be an old IT suite, and they'd gone to a model where they now have tablets on a trolley that go around school. And they turned it into something called the Museum of Everything, which is connected to our project, the Lost Lending Library. And they, go in through a door, you go into a mini Lost Lending Library, and then the door slides back, and then you walk into the Museum of Everything. And when you can ignite teachers' professional imagination and encourage them to be playful by modeling best practice of that through your own projects and through effective and meta training experiences, then teachers can adopt that practice. So we've had 7 projects developed last year, teachers taking their own projects and bringing them to life. And my hope is that we can build a body of work that is a shared resource that teachers can use, and a shared body of practice. And it was interesting listening to you. I know I keep referring to your podcast that you did a couple of years ago, Tim, but that's thing of, are you trying to create a movement? But I think trying to create a body of practice, I want to enable teachers and schools to be able to adopt our practice, if indeed they choose to and want to, and to be able to have resources to do that, which are informed by the practice of teachers, because it's the collaboration and the interaction of classroom practice and our practice is a special thing. That's where we as theatre directors and creators, we're control freaks, but actually I'm really interested in handing over those tools and then seeing what happens, because teachers will do it in different ways and in the right ways for them, and for their teachers. So I am hoping that we can, in terms of the small, and I know it's quite small scale work that we've done with these 17 schools, make a wider case and create a body of work and a momentum that will see more schools adopting this nationally. And we do work nationally, but I think we need there to be more time and more value kind of placed on this, and we need more leaders who can recognize this, because ultimately it's the leaders of schools who enable this to happen. And we've seen that when leaders go, look, you use your planning time to plan this project and nothing else, I'm going to give you the time to do it, then teachers have got the freedom and the space to create.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in education 30 years now, and things turn in cycles. I started teaching when I was at the early 90s, and we went through a cycle then we went through another cycle, and now I feel we're coming to the end of this cycle, and we seem to be, I don't quite know what the right metaphor is, but we seem as a profession to be damned to repeat the mistakes of the past. So we keep, this cycle that we went through, as we were coming into it, there were people like me who'd seen the previous two. We were saying, look, all this sort of focus on skill, on knowledge and and punctuation and spelling and grammar and all these sort of and timetabling primary education. It comes at a cost. The benefit, of course, is that those things that might have not been taught, discreetly and systematically, that's a benefit to them. So those things need to carry on being done. But you've mentioned several times during our conversation this thing around time. And whenever I talk to teachers, the biggest problem that they have is time. It's not will. It's not the desire to do it. It's not the belief that it's right for the students, or that it doesn't make a difference. It's just when can you do it? Because the timetable is so packed, the curriculum is so full, and the pressures on teachers are so intense because of the way that standards are rated in a very narrow band of things that children can do. So things like creativity, the reason that they got squeezed so hard, I believe, is, as I say, not because teachers wanted it or head teachers wanted it, but because they don't get up the league table. They're not the things that are evaluated, But here's the thing, and this is the hope that we share, is that the cycle is turning, and the sort of sounds that are beginning to hear about how things will change in change of government. I noticed that the creativity is starting to creep back in. That the use of words like imagination and children, having the opportunity to explore their own ideas is starting to creep back into the conversation, and we can see that there are lots of students, I believe lots of students who've missed out, and you've talked about them all the way through, Pete. These ones who are on the edge, these ones who don't engage with the curriculum, the ones who are kind of either there because they have to be, that they're not really engaged in learning particularly, who just come to life, who suddenly they're lit up by what you're doing. And that's, those children, they're the ones that we've got to teach for everybody. We've got to reach those ones as well. I'm gonna end it in a minute, and just wanted to thank you for this conversation, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. You have mentioned a couple of times you've sort of talked about this thing about your hope, but I don't know if you've come across something called solution-focused inquiry, but it's an idea that somebody called Jeff James introduced me to, and he always ends with what's your best hope? What is the thing that you hope for most in the future? So if I ask you that question, I can see you've got your thinking face on. What's your best hope? And it could be anything really, be about your work or future of education, whatever you like, really.
Yeah, I think it is that my hope is that we begin to you talk about the the constraints of teachers on and what they need to achieve. My hope is that there is a recognition that we can do all of that systematic work, and we can achieve the results that are needed, but that there is a permission to do that in a way which comes from the left field, as it were, and that isn't that sort of direct and sedentary and boring. There's a recognition that getting children active, whether that's forest school, whether that's Mantle the Expert, whether that's immersive learning, that is given value and that is given importance, and that will both, you can demonstrate that in standards, but more than that, you build resilient and brilliantly imaginative young people who are ready for whatever the world is going to chuck at them in the next 50 to 100 years, and that actually also that we're thinking about education in that way, and we're thinking about it in terms of what is the world that we're taking our children into. It's not, and is that education system fit for it? And actually we need engaged, resilient, imaginative pupils, and actually doing that in the way that we've been doing it might not be right, and actually allowing schools the space to do things differently and to actually and my hope is that we can also empower universities and training programs to be focusing on imaginative teachers, actually, because I think when you and actually that it doesn't just exist in the bubble of training, that actually that then flows into practice as well, because I think one of the biggest tools you have is imagination in the classroom, but the one of the most precious resources we have are teachers, and teachers who feel imaginatively valued and feel that they have that agency. It is hugely important, because that's going to drive people into that profession. So more imagination is my hope, and more embracing of approaches to learning and approaches to school life, which more awe, more wonder, more joy, more laughter, and more stories, really. That's my hope. There's lots of hopes there. I've answered too many hopes.
No, you can't have too many hopes. That's great. Thank you so much. That's been so interesting. It's been brilliant. To you. Yeah, brilliant.
We have a narrow curriculum which squeezes out the arts. So let's rethink education. There is a lack of imagination and not enough fun. So let's rethink education. Children should be self-directed, showing us their way. Let them lead. Transferable skills should be the core of what we teach. Learn for life. So let's try the children as Ofsted ranks the schools. So let's rethink education. We have a lack of agency. We're trapped inside the system. So let's rethink education. A place of transformation that embraces community. School is the heart. A place to dream, a place to play, a place to think and love. Feeling free. So let's trust, let's be brave. Let's do what's right and not what is required. Let's have fun, let's explore. Let's bring back the love, forget the fear of being fired. Let's trust, let's be brave. Let's do what's right and not what is required.